Welcome to the Cheryl and Shirley Show. Today, my guest is Elizabeth Gebert. She is a prosecutor, has been one for most of her career. Thank you very much, Liz, for coming on. I call her Liz because she is my friend too, so that counts. But she's on here to talk today a little bit about what it's like to be a prosecutor and what the difference is between a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and what prosecutors do with victims and what goes on in the courts. So thank you, Liz, for joining me today. What a nice subject.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Cheryl. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about just the important function that a prosecutor serves. And I think when the public thinks about the criminal court system, we hear prosecutor, we hear defense attorney, we hear these different terms, and sometimes people don't understand or just, a lot of people just don't ever have interaction with the criminal justice system because for most of us, we stay on the right side of the law and we're fortunate enough to never be victims of a criminal case. But that's really what I'm here to talk about is the work that a prosecutor does working with victims and the support that we provide to victims. In the event that people become a victim of a crime, understanding what the prosecutor does, I think is an important thing for everybody to know. So I'm using the term prosecutor in Wisconsin. Prosecutors are the district attorneys. So when you hear district attorney, assistant district attorney, what we're talking about are the prosecutors who work on behalf of the state of Wisconsin. So as the prosecutors for the state of Wisconsin, it is my responsibility to prosecute referrals that come from law enforcement agencies who conduct the investigations. So, initially, the victim's first point of contact will, of course, be law enforcement when they call 911, when they go down to the police department or the sheriff's office to file a report about something that happened to them. The law enforcement officers do that initial investigation, and then when the investigation is concluded, they then present the referral to the district attorney's office where the prosecutor, oftentimes me, will review the investigation and then decide what charges will be filed and how the case will proceed through the court process. So, bringing the victims into that, for me, I have always felt that integrating victims into the process as early as possible is really important, both for me to prove the case, but then I think really more significantly to provide victims with the information and take the mystery and the uncertainty out of being part of the court case. So in Wisconsin and most places, victims are not technically the party. They are not the complaining party on a criminal case. The state of Wisconsin is. But that being said, victims have a lot of rights in Wisconsin. Um, and I work as a prosecutor not just to provide them with those basic rights that are guaranteed in the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, but also additional support and information, whatever I can do to make them feel like they understand what's going on and they feel like their voice is heard. I've heard from victims throughout my career that not knowing a lot about the criminal justice system really makes it so they don't even know what questions to ask because they're so unfamiliar with what any of this even is. So working with those victims, I try to make it so they have a good open line of communication with me, with my office, so that when they do have questions, they have a way to get their questions answered, but then also really just provide them with a lot of information very early on so that they at least have a framework to understand what's going on.
Mm. So, Liz, how long have you been a prosecutor in the state of Wisconsin?
So I started practicing in 2009, right after I graduated from law school. And I've been a prosecutor since day one. I knew that working to give victims justice in the court process was something that was really meaningful to me. I've always been a rule follower, so I knew being a prosecutor
Me
was a
too.
good fit, right? I'm not gonna,
Mhm. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. One of my sayings is, "Tell me the rules, I follow the rules. Just tell me the rules and I'll follow them." I'm a rule follower too, so I totally understand that. And as you know, by knowing me for a little while, that I am a person who follows, like, true crime and things like that, and I enjoy it very much. And so I do watch a lot of prosecutors on Dateline and things like that, which sounds a
Yeah.
little crazy, but, I see exactly how strong they are dealing with victims, so I can only imagine. And in, like, central Wisconsin, where you have kinda concentrated your career that at least I know about, there's a lot of different kinds of crime that go on here, and I'm sure that that touches you as much. And here you are, you know, not only just a prosecutor, but you're also a woman, a person that's out there, and so it affects us in different ways. And I know it affects me because I just was reading about some young kid that, you know, was his father or mother's put in Indiana, a case in Indiana. A 9-month-old was gonna be sold for sex or something, and I'm like, "What kind of person is this?" So I can't imagine it because I would wanna, like, do something bad, and you can't really do that. So your mind has to be set on what your job is. So how does that work for you? I mean, that's gotta be a little bit difficult, that you have to go into that mindset of, "This is what I have to do. I'm a prosecutor, so I'm prosecuting for the state of Wisconsin, but I'm also supporting this victim." And how do you separate that? Because that has to be difficult.
Yeah, it certainly is difficult, Cheryl, and that was something I had to figure out early in my career. As a prosecutor, I started so not to reveal too much about myself, but I was 28 years old when I started as a prosecutor,
Wow.
and, yeah, and initially it was hard to, let to figure out how to put up the right boundaries so that you can care about your cases and still seem compassionate, but then at the same time, not bring all of that truly into your heart, not carry that
Mhm.
burden personally. Yeah, so that is something that was really a struggle initially. But mean, through self-care, through all those things that, we talk about now
Mhm.
that is just so it's a different world and such a good thing that we actually talk about these things, how to take care of yourself and through um, gardening, playing the piano,
Mm.
cooking, baking, walking with my husband and my dog, just doing those things. Remembering the good in the world, I think, is really important. And that has what has helped me to keep the right perspective and not either burn out or become just a cynical, bitter human being. Because I think what people don't realize, right, in Wisconsin, like crime is everywhere and we see the most
Mhm.
heinous crimes, even in central Wisconsin, where we all have other than the people who come from other places to this wonderful part of the state, we have this very charming accent. We have this very gregarious, welcoming kind of culture. And even in this setting where people joke about how nice people from Wisconsin are, we have sexual assaults, we have violent child sexual assaults, we have homicides, we have brutal domestic violence. We have really the most
Mhm.
serious and violent crimes here, just like anywhere else. People sometimes will ask if I'm busy as a prosecutor in central Wisconsin, and I say you should come and follow me for a day, and you'll see just how truly busy we are because it is nonstop. So, yeah.
So, what I mean, like, what is a day like in Elizabeth Giebert's, life as a prosecutor in central Wisconsin?
Yeah, right. Well, I do actually, so I start my day with either yoga or a walk with my husband, something
Yeah.
to get my brain framed for a challenging day. And then basically from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m., sometimes with a lunch break, sometimes no lunch break. I am
Mhm.
doing a combination of court appearances, litigation, negotiation with opposing counsel, victim
Mhm.
meetings. And I know for me, um, I try to prioritize those victim meetings. I really truly do. So if a victim wants to talk to me and I have 15 minutes, they weren't on my calendar, I say I'll still take that call. So drop everything to talk to a victim if that comes in,
Mhm.
which those calls do come in. Um, yeah, and then also, training law enforcement, responding to law enforcement questions, reviewing search
Mhm.
warrants. Yeah, so anytime a law enforcement officer wants to get a search warrant from a judge, it needs to be reviewed by a prosecutor, and I review a lot of search warrants for law enforcement, and then also just answered other general questions law enforcement has in the context of criminal investigations. If they need some direction on what can they do next legally, what should they do next strategically, working with law enforcement to
Mhm.
produce a quality investigation. Yeah, and being in court can be anything from motion hearings, fighting to keep my case alive, to jury trials, plea and sentencing hearings. Advocating for the right sentence on behalf of both what the state is concerned about and what the victim is seeking or hoping to get out of a criminal case. Yeah, so
Mhm.
that's the work day, and then it ends, and I come home and just go back to being a wife. I'm a little bit traditional, so I like to cook dinner for my husband, and I like to clean
Right.
the kitchen so it's clean the way I want it to be clean, right? So do all of that stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, we wear a lot
That's
of
good.
hats, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when a victim, is going through this process because, like you said, most of us don't really think about being victims. I certainly do not think about being a victim, and I know like I said, I've watched a lot of the shows and stuff, so I kinda get how it kinda works a little bit, but a lot of people out there don't know that when you're a victim, you do have help as a team, and also, like, the victim impact statements when they get to come up and speak or something. Does a prosecutor help them with that, or do they send them do they give them information on where to go to get help on that? Because I think that's kind of important too. I think we really and truly there for a while, we were putting criminals up above the victims, and that always drove me crazy. It still does if I see that, and I do see it once in a while. I prefer a victim that goes through something, even if it's your house being robbed. I mean, if I walked into my home and it's been gone through by people, that's a violation. It's kinda like hits the root, also scares you as a person. Like, it would be scary to me to have that happen. I've been very fortunate to never have that happen, but we have had, like our cars broken into before. Not here, thank goodness, but where we lived before. And that was pretty scary just to go through that. Someone had actually I guess, broke a glass and cut their hand, and their blood was on our door, which flipped me out, on our screen door, outside glass door. Yeah, where we lived. And we were both a little bit freaked out, but then we find out later that it was like 14 and 15-year-old kids, and it's just a shame that that happens. So, yeah, it's so I kinda wonder, like, as a victim, does a prosecutor help them? Because really, I was so angry that time because we were running our business and they broke in, and then it was like, "Oh, they're 14, 15-year-old kids." Well, send them over here. I'll make them do yard work. They're gonna it's gonna be a price to pay. But, of course, that didn't happen. So it's kind of frustrating, but I think as a victim of a crime, especially a serious crime or something, I would hope that the prosecutors here in central Wisconsin especially would go out on the limb to try to help all the victims and help them at least learn where to go to find out information. Any
Yeah, well,
resources.
and what you're talking about, I tell victims because because people are so nice, right? So they'll come to a meeting with me and they'll say, "Oh, thank you so much for meeting with me, giving me your time. I know this isn't that serious of a case." And I actually stop them right there and I say, "You know, I can see you're here, you want to talk to me. I can see that this is a serious case to you." And so sometimes people will say, "Oh, well, it was," that's a frequent argument I'll hear from the defense side during an argued sentencing. "Well, this was just a property crime." And I say, you
Mhm.
know, talking to the victim and hearing how their security has been permanently altered, their sense of safety
Mhm.
and security in their home has been completely changed because of the defendant violating that safe space. That is a serious case. That isn't a victimless
Mhm.
crime or not that serious of a crime. So certainly I think anytime, we talk about the sanctity of your body and the sanctity of your home, like to me those are the two most serious spaces for individuals just to feel good about the world and feel safe in the world. And so to have your property burglarized is in a lot of ways it can be just as emotionally taxing or very emotionally
Mhm.
taxing as having somebody strike you in the face or something like that. So with victims, yes, we do support victims in Wisconsin. Every district attorney's office has a victim witness unit that is staffed to assist with making sure the victim and the prosecutor are in communication with each other, that victims are getting information in a timely manner. Largely, the victim witness coordinator will assist the victim with writing their victim impact statement.
Mhm.
If the victim has questions, if they need some more support, that would be in the form of advocacy. The district attorney's
Mhm.
office can't provide that advocacy in Wisconsin, but there are local agencies that have advocates who can assist victims with um, getting, emotional support if it's individual counseling,
Mhm.
group counseling sessions, that sort of thing. The Family Center here in Wisconsin Rapids is really a great resource for domestic
Mhm.
violence
Mhm.
victims, for example. And so there are also advocacy agencies that can help with that. I used to serve on the board here, the Family Center board here in Wisconsin Rapids, and the work they do is really so essential and important for victims and for prosecutors, because we need our victims to feel like the system is supporting them, or and I wouldn't blame them if they felt like the system wasn't supporting them and they felt they needed to
Mhm.
flee to protect themselves. Well, then so be it, but that means I can't prosecute my case. So, we need victims to feel like the system is supporting them too. But those victim impact statements, I think, are really so essential. And I always encourage victims to make a victim impact statement, because I think a judge sitting on the bench, when you're looking at this case, what do you have? You have the criminal complaint, which is the document that the state produces that gives a short summary of what the charges are and the basis for the charges. You have the arguments that the prosecutor makes for what the sentence should be. You have all of the arguments the defense attorney will make and all of the whatever statement the defendant will make. And that's what you have to hear. And if you don't have that victim impact statement, it feels pretty sanitized. And so to have that
Mhm.
victim impact statement where it's the victim saying, "This is how this incident has affected me and continues to affect me." And that's, I think, really, for a judge, that's the piece that, if that's missing, it can leave you wondering, well, what really was the impact of this crime
Mhm.
on the victim, on society. The victim impact statement can
Mhm.
really bridge that gap and that fill that information void. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So do you, and I'm not really sure about this, but like, do you prosecute in family court too, or is it just your criminal? And
Just
there's a difference.
Just criminal, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So family court is private attorneys, civil attorneys. In Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin holds a monopoly on my law license, so I can't do anything but criminal cases for the state of Wisconsin.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's nice and clear. So how about organizations? Are there organizations that you belong to for your job, or is that necessary, or is that
It's
something
not
that you just do on your own?
Yeah, it's not necessary, but I am pretty involved with different organizations. Like I said, I work with law enforcement agency, different law enforcement agencies throughout Marathon County as well as at the state level with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. I have worked with the FBI on investigations. I've worked with the U.S.
Mm.
Marshals. I've done training with the Secret Service, actually. So, some really interesting different government agencies that I work with. But then also,
Mm.
I am on the board of the State of Wisconsin Bar Association criminal law section, and I was just elevated to being the chair elect. So, I'm in a
Nice.
leadership role with that board, and it's like, what is that board? What does that even mean? Well, what's really important about that board is, when legislators are looking at proposing a law, if it's going to impact criminal law in Wisconsin, they reach out to the criminal law section board to have us review their draft legislation and give them our feedback. And so, you were saying that it's hard because you get frustrated when you see the defendant sometimes being put ahead of the victim as
Mhm.
far as the priority. And really, as a prosecutor, I have found that my really important role on that board even is to make sure that we're not looking at this legislation only from the defense perspective, which is a very kind of the majority perspective on that board because there are only a few prosecutors and there are a lot of defense attorneys. So being on that board as a prosecutor, I weigh in on every single proposed legislation that comes through. I weigh in because I'm presenting the prosecution perspective, which tends to be the public safety perspective, the victim perspective, as opposed to just saying, well, how is this law going to help the defendant? Or is it gonna or,
Mhm.
is this law gonna hurt a defendant? That's not so much my job. My job as the prosecutor tends to be, is this law going to protect the public, and is this law going to be just for victims? So that's a really important board. And then the other thing I do that I'm just very passionate about, I'm on the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association Executive Committee, and on that committee, through that organization, I do a lot of work with prosecutors trying to retain good prosecutors, trying to recruit new attorneys to become prosecutors. I think this work that we do is so important, and it's very important to have high quality, passionate people serving as prosecutors. So, most recently with that, I'm organizing a networking event at the University of Wisconsin Law School in September to try to start to get law students to be at least interested in the idea of becoming a prosecutor. Um, right now, I think our society has become a little anti law enforcement, and that has trickled into the law school where it's much more popular and cool to talk about becoming a defense attorney than it is to talk
Mhm.
about becoming a prosecutor. And so I'm really excited to have that event because I want to make sure law students think about the work this work that I do that I'm talking to you about, working with victims and working to protect the public, how can that not be a really like cool, important job, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, some of the things that frustrate me is, what you're telling me is what you do, it's more common sense for, like, the people out here. When I look at it, that's kinda what I want as somebody that's prosecuting criminals in my area. I want them to think about us out here, the victims, and the people that live out here, the citizens that are law-abiding citizens. I don't need someone to stick up more for a, person who has violated the law many times. I get it, the sad stories of people that have had horrible home lives and all this. Yeah, I'm sorry, but, doesn't mean you violate the law. And it's so frustrating when I see that happen. And, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, kids coming young people, I shouldn't say kids because to me they're kids, but, they're young people coming out of law school and, they're in their 20s already, so they're ready to go. So, yeah, we need that. We need young people involved too, and I think that's a really good thing to get that mindset. Because when I saw that young man 26 years old that shot that, health insurance guy right, on the middle of the street, you're like, "What is happening to our society?" You know, it blows my mind a little bit as I've gotten older. I've seen this where I see, just like you said, the law enforcement. I feel really bad for police officers and things like just seeing the Milwaukee police officer, young man. I mean, I just don't understand how we have gotten to that point where we don't. If somebody pulls me over, I already know inside of my head I must have done something wrong. That's kind of how I think because I follow the rules. If I don't follow the rules, there's going to be a consequence, and that's how I think. I pull over. I'm respectful. I would never start yelling at a police officer, acting like a maniac, and I just don't understand that. So, I'm having a hard time with that, but I think people in my age group do have a hard time with that, or any age group, truthfully, that has any respect for law enforcement, and I've always had respect for law enforcement. So, I totally appreciate everything that the guys do in the blue and the court systems that I don't sometimes we hear about judges that maybe aren't stern enough or strict enough, and I've heard that before too, "Well, this judge gives way too much leniency." And as a prosecutor, what do you think of that? Because that has to be frustrating too.
I it is frustrating. So and that is so I will say as a prosecutor, there are times where I consider a person's background when I'm making my sentence recommendation, and there are factors that I'll consider to say, well, so for example, this person doesn't have a prior record, else, and it's
Mhm.
not and it's a misdemeanor level nonviolent offense. I'll look for options to try to rehabilitate that person because if they don't have a record and it's a low level offense, maybe we can figure out how to get them right and do just one intervention and then they'll never come back again, right? Isn't that the hope? But I agree when they're I think about Daryl Brooks. So just as an example,
Mhm.
um the Racine parade, was it or
Mm.
Kenosha? Kenosha.
No, it was it was no, wait, no, I think it was Waukesha. The Christmas parade? Wasn't he the one
Yeah, the Christmas
I think
parade,
it was the
gotcha.
Waukesha. Yeah. Yeah, that was the
Um,
Christmas parade. It was Waukesha.
yeah, but,
I just saw,
but
something about the little 8-year-old boy recently that his or 6-year-old boy, whatever, his birthday would have been coming up soon, and that's just so tragic, you know?
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
he should have been in
yeah,
jail.
and I think
That's what's
about right,
frustrating is things like
right,
that.
and I think about somebody like that where, um bond is a big issue right now, being held in custody or released on a bond, right? That's a big topic right now
Mhm.
in our society, and I know that's something that judges just in over the course of the last 16 years, I've watched judges become more lenient with bonds, and when I think about those people, I understand you're charged with a crime, you're not convicted yet, but when the court sets bond, they can consider the strength of the state's evidence and when they decide what bond to set, and when the evidence, by and large, we don't bring a criminal prosecution unless the prosecutor believes that there's sufficient evidence to
Mhm.
find this person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And the court can consider the strength of that evidence when they set the bond. But that has almost gone by the wayside now. And in a lot of places, judges will set a signature bond, no matter how many open cases a person has, how many times they've been released on a signature bond, how many times they got out of jail
Mhm.
and continue to commit crimes. Um, and you think about those scenarios where you don't want to ever say anything of, hindsight is 2020. If that guy had been held in custody, he wouldn't have been able to drive around. He was out on a felony
Yeah.
bond. If he had been held, that wouldn't have happened. Um, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think the courts have
Mhm.
become a bit more lenient, and I think that is problematic when it comes to,
Yeah.
public safety is the big
Mhm.
piece of it for me, protecting the
Yeah.
public, and the defense will say, "Bond is only for making sure a person comes back to court." No, bond can also be for public safety. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a constant struggle. You can hear I'm struggling.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I understand it, and what I wanna say is I'm glad that we have prosecutors like you out there, so I appreciate that because I know we've had conversations on the side a few times about not about any certain case or anything, but just about what, how it is, and I know that it has to be a tough job. I can understand that, and I can just see you just walking right up there, "Boop, boop, boop, I'm gonna take on this person." I can see it. I see it, Liz, going up there and getting him. Well, Liz, I don't want to take too much more of your time because I know you're very busy, but I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. And I'll give you the last word and then we'll go out, but stay online for a minute, all right, after I stop recording. But I want to say thank you very much for joining the Cheryl and Shirley show today. And we appreciate all that you're doing for the area. We really do. And keep up the good work.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to you. I know we have good conversations. I feel like we could keep on going for quite a while, almost every time. But I wanted to also just say, I right now prosecuting it for Marathon County, being up in Wausau. I really look forward to getting back to Wood County, and I'm hoping maybe one of these days, maybe next April, I might look to take the bench here in Wood County when there's a seat open. So we'll see how the next few months progress. But thank you so much for having me, and I'd love to come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And this is the Shirley and Shirley Show signing off. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, plus my website. So, signing off now. You have a good day, and thank you so much for listening.